Alright everyone, I hope you enjoyed the documentaries you watched on Friday because we're going to continue with your evaluation of that selected topic by looking at the diagnostic models used by health psychologists. So reference things that you saw in the video, or if you want to do external additional research and find things that are relevant to the topic that you selected, you're going to apply the model for today to that selected issue that you want to investigate for health psychology. All right, so first let's get a simple definition of what exactly is health psychology. All right, what health psychology looks at is the psychological impacts of health and a healthy lifestyle. We know that a lot of health problems are built around a person's lifestyle and choices that they make and the job that they have, the location where they live, activities that they choose to be a part of. So all those lifestyle choices have a relationship to your health. It's not mental health, it's your physical health. So your susceptibility to sicknesses, illnesses, enduring life problems like heart disease or diabetes, right? All of those physical health problems are related to your lifestyle and how you think about and process the world around you. So a lot of health psychologists will use the biopsychosocial model to help them explain those lifestyle choices and how it might be playing a role in an individual's susceptibility to health problems. Right? This is really similar to the biopsychosocial model that we use within mental health issues. And so it says that health problems are a relationship of physical body issues, your psychological cognitive forces, and then environmental social forces like your culture or your social position within society. And so if we can adjust one or more of these contributing factors, well, hopefully we'll be able to improve the health of our patients and help them recover and get better faster. So let's look at some of the biological factors that might be playing a role in all of this. All right. We know that some biological forces are just outside of your control. If you remember from AP Psychology last year, in our developmental unit, we talked about how as you age, your immune system tends to slow down, and so it can't respond to infections as quickly. During this COVID element, right, people that are most susceptible to getting it are those that are over the age of 60. Right? It's because their bodies just naturally can't produce the antibodies needed to fight off new infections. Versus there's a lot of people between the ages of 20 and 40 who are asymptomatic. And so even though their body has the infection, they were able to create antibodies so quickly that they never developed the symptoms that would help us identify if they had the COVID-19 virus or not. Your sex, that's something that's outside of your control. And so we do know that certain cancers infect males versus females differently. For example, breast cancer is much more common within women than men, even though both of them can develop it. And so some things like those are outside of your control, but knowing those contributing factors might help a health psychologist know what populations, what demographic might be more susceptible to certain health risks. Right? There are things that are in our control. Certain nutritional elements, what we choose to eat, our eating behaviors, right? Certain foods will impact our bodies. So for example, Reynolds did a study looking at school nutritional programs, specifically with a fourth grade school within a county, and so used 4 different schools and evaluated training on nutrition, the importance of eating fruits and vegetables, making sure that it was supplied free to the school, and so all students had fruit supplied during their lunch and their snack times. And what they found is that by having good nutrition available at school and having nutritional training, those children actually experience fewer absences at school across the entire school year. Right? So even just that minor change in what you're eating actually had a positive benefit to your physical health. Things like stress, right? Stress impacts your body's immune system, and so the more stressed you are, the slower it is for your body to actually fight off these infections. We know that people who are wounded when they're in high stressed moments versus low stress moments, those minor bruises, those cuts that you have, they take longer to heal when you're under stress versus when you're not stressed. We know that people that are more stressed are actually more susceptible to infections. So things like the common cold, you're much more likely to catch that when you're under periods of stress versus periods of not stressed. For example, during this stressful time of people not knowing what's happening, we have a lot of people at home who are developing these colds, getting coughs and sneezes. And because those are also similar symptoms to the COVID virus, some people are actually misdiagnosing themselves at home when it's just the natural cold or allergy symptoms that are manifesting. And it's because we are more susceptible to those cold elements under these durations of stress. Right, so last year in AP Psychology, we talked about the general adaptation syndrome. Right, it looks at our body's natural responses to stress and how do they develop. Right, so phase 1, we have that alarm stage. That's where your sympathetic nervous system kicks in, that fight or flight response, and so we're going to try and respond to all of these external things. Your heartbeat is going to speed up, you're going to have more blood sent to your skeletal muscles, and all of your stress hormones are going to be produced. So your body's going to have more adrenaline within the system, more cortisol. And so that's the initial, first response to that fear, that stressful trigger that's in your environment. All right, phase 2, that's the resistance phase. This is where you're fighting the stressor, you're trying to resist the issue, kind of power through and get, kind of overcome that stress element. This would be during the exam week or during tech week for my theater kids. Right? You're just kind of powering through and you don't feel bad just yet. But because of that, it's because your body's in that fight or flight response for an extended period of time. And so your blood pressure's been high for a long time. Your stress hormones are kind of been released into your blood supply and you're reaching the limits of what your body has. And so you're almost running out of those stress hormones that allow for this fight or flight response to continue. Which means once you run out of those stress hormones, you're in the exhaustion phase. All right, your body is physically depleted. You've put a lot of stress on your heart, a lot of stress on your skeletal muscles. You have no more stress hormones to help those things mend and fix themselves and get better. And so you're much more vulnerable to illnesses and death during that exhaustion phase because your body's been under stress for such an extended period of time. And so what a health psychologist would be interested in is evaluating these biological forces, both the predispositions that you might have or how your body's responding to certain stressful environments or certain infections that are present within your environment. So take a moment and think about your chosen topic and evaluate what biological elements might be playing a role in this issue that health psychologists are interested in and trying to fix. So take a minute and answer that portion of your worksheet, and then when you're ready, you can restart this lecture and move on. All right, what we also know is that there are some cognitive issues. Our psychological frame of mind will let us understand these health problems and how it could play a role in the issue that you're dealing with. All right, so the social self-preservation theory, it looks at these personal beliefs that somebody has and how does that influence your rate of health and the risk factors that you might have. All right, what social self-preservation theory states is anything that's a threat to your self-esteem can be associated with a negative response. So because this thing threatens my self-esteem, I might experience embarrassment or shame. I might feel humiliated. And so those negative responses, those threats will then impact your physical health. Right? So maybe because of this shame that I feel, I now isolate myself, I become depressed, and I stop eating properly. And so that's going to have a physical impact on me, not just a mental impact. And so a lot of our cognitive issues, it looks at how people interpret these threats to our self-esteem. And is this going to make me feel ashamed? Is this going to make me feel embarrassed? Or is it going to be a more positive reaction where I don't necessarily see it as a threat to who I am, but more of a glancing blow or something like that? Right? So for example, pessimistic individuals, they actually have higher health risks compared to our optimistic individuals. Reed did a study of individuals that have been infected with HIV, and what they found is that by talking with them, those that had a very pessimistic view of their quality of life, of how quickly the disease might progress into becoming AIDS, they actually had the symptoms progress at a faster rate compared to those that were more optimistic, that there were viable treatment plans, that they had this disease, but it wasn't going to define their life. And so that pessimistic frame of mind actually was correlated with a higher development and higher, faster transition into the AIDS disease. Greer also documented this with cancers victims, specifically women who were fighting breast cancer. Right, those of them that had the fighting spirit, that this is something that they will beat and overcome, they actually had better success rates with their treatment programs versus chemotherapy or whatever their doctors had prescribed for them. Right, so it is that self-preservation. Right, these diseases, they are threats to your self-esteem. They are threats to your quality of life. But those that are pessimistic about that outcome versus optimistic that this isn't going to define who they are, they actually had a faster, easier ability of overcoming this. Right? Another cognitive thing that we talked about last year in AP Psychology was those type A versus type B personalities. All right, if you remember from AP Psych, type A individuals, they tend to be very highly motivated, very driven, very competitive. Right, so they have these cognitive frame of minds that this is something that I should be doing, and that frame set actually pose them at a higher risk of heart disease problems compared to our type B that are less motivated, less competitive, and so they don't necessarily experience as many threats to their self-esteem. All right, so individuals that are type A are much more likely to be hostile or cynical, and those are actually 5 times more likely to develop heart disease and much more likely to die by middle age compared to our type B that are more gentle and trusting individuals. Type A, they're much more likely to be quick to anger, which means they're 3 times more likely to have a heart attack. They're 5 times more likely to suffer that heart attack by 55, again, compared to our type Bs that are less anger-driven. And again, pessimism, you're twice as likely to develop heart disease problems compared to our optimists. And so we do see that there are some cognitive things, the choices that we make, the motivating factors that we have, and our likelihood of perceiving a threat where one might not be as threatening as it could be. All right, so take a moment and evaluate these cognitive issues and how it might have played a role in your selective topic. And then once you've filled in that part of the worksheet, you can restart this lecture, move on and look at the sociocultural issues. All right, when we look at sociocultural, we know that there's a lot of environmental forces that could play a role in our physical health. All right, there's certain social norms that we have. Our smoking and vaping trends. Smoking is not as prevalent amongst adolescents now compared to 20 years ago, but vaping is something that's very popular within adolescents compared to other age groups. And so how acceptable or unacceptable is this? Right, there's been a lot of campaigns against smoking, and now there's more campaigns against vaping by addressing those health risks. And the more likely we are to buy into those campaigns and understand those health risks, the greater likelihood that those norms might change. For example, smoking. There used to be doctors that would recommend certain brands of cigarettes because the norm said that this was something that was good and healthy. Sometimes it was prescribed for asthma patients that you should smoke because it'll help clear out the lungs. Right? So these norms do play a role, and it's the facts that we buy into, that informational social influence theory we talked about before. Right? The facts of society influence the types of choices that we have and those norms of what's a healthy lifestyle choice versus not. There's a lot of socioeconomic factors. Our position within society actually does play a role on our physical health. A lot of you chose to watch the diet's influence on your health. So watching the What the Health movie or that sugar movie. All right, well, part of the reason why we have high rates of diabetes, we have these high sugar foods, right? It's because we often live in these urban deserts or food deserts. All right, easy access to fresh produce is not available, especially in large cities. In certain areas, there just aren't grocery stores, and so what's available are these fast food restaurants or these highly processed foods that you can have in like the CVS or the 7-Eleven. And so it's not necessarily that they're consciously choosing to eat high fatty foods, it's just that that's all that's available. And so these urban areas, they're food deserts because they don't have access to nutritional food items as quickly or easily as maybe you or I, where we have grocery stores and easy access with it less than a mile away. There's also elements of environmental racism. Some of you chose to watch the poverty's impact on health. There's something in the water, or the no one watched the Motel movie, and I can't even remember the title of it. But what we find is that most waste areas, so factories, dumps, they're put in areas where it is consumed by poverty. And because of having these factories that are polluting the air or these dumps that might be polluting the water, it's impacting those marginalized communities that aren't able to speak out or fight about this issue. If you've paid attention to the Dakota Access Line, the oil line that was supposed to go through a Native American reservation, well, that oil line actually was pre-planned to go through a wealthy community, and the people there stood up and said, we don't want it coming through our neighborhood, and they had money and they had access to politicians, and they were able to get those oil lines to be redirected to a more poverty-stricken area. And so when those Native Americans spoke up about their reservation lands and how they wanted their lands to be protected, well, they're marginalized and people weren't necessarily paying attention to their issues, and it became a long, drawn-out like standoff between these two forces. And so environmental racism does play a role because poverty can impact your physical health. The social position that you have, it could play a role in your health problems. Those that are marginalized, people who lack social support, they are more likely to develop health problems. So Taylor, she did an evaluation of social support. How likely are people to talk about problems, and how likely their friends are supposed to come and help and support them through whatever physical health issues that they have. All right, what we find is that women are much better at social support. They tend and befriend, as how Taylor put it. And so they check in on their friends. They're much more likely to give emotional and physical support to people by stepping in and cooking meals or taking care of children, versus men, their friend groups, their support structure isn't necessarily as there. And so maybe part of the reason why men have higher heart disease risks is maybe because they don't have that social support, and they're forcing themselves to power through health issues to get back to work, to get back to helping their family, where women have that social support that allows them times to sit and rest and physically heal. So that might play a role in why we have these different elements. Right. AP Psychology, we looked at this element. We know people who live in these unequal situations, they actually have higher health risks. So living in a poverty area, they have greater risks for violent death. They have lower access to public health, education, and lower income. And so their ability to actually remove themselves from this health risk area is really detrimental. Some health psychologists actually put a lot of early intervention programs in these poverty-stricken areas by ensuring that there's food access through schools. I don't know if you're following, but Montgomery County, when they are posting their distance learning plans, they also post what the food sites are for the day, so people who don't have easy access to good nutrition, they still have food available for them. That's one of what health psychologists are doing to help the the poverty areas, but because we do know that poverty is a big contributing factor to health issues. All right, so this is the last one. Go through and apply these health problems to your selected topic, fill in that worksheet, and then submit it, and you're done for the day. Again, if you have any questions, I'll be online at 9 and at 2 o'clock today, so feel free to Zoom in, or you can email me whatever questions you might have. All right, have a good day.